Today we are reading through an article that was published within an illustrated American weekly magazine in 1883. This magazine is called The Continent, and the article itself being written by Hester M. Poole, exploring the world and art of terracotta. So let's get right to the reading. Thank you all for taking the time to listen, and hope this adds some details of interest to this incredible and truly ancient material. Let's begin. Terracotta in architecture. The traveler going westward in New Jersey, from Woodbridge or Perth Amboy to New Brunswick, will find this road bordered by frequent hollows, which stretch irregularly on either hand. The color of the soil, denuded and exposed, varies from a soft buff to that deep red which owes its richness to the presence of iron, a trace of which is found in all the circumjacent region. For a long distance his way will be marked by these excavations, which are sometimes scores of feet in depth. At the bottom, sinuous wagon roads lead around banks of clay where large gangs of laborers are constantly at work. The undulating surface of the country, sparsely settled and frequently covered with a thick growth of young pines, birches, and maples, gives no indication of the riches concealed below, for underlying it all is one vast bed of the best and finest of that clay which is used in the manufacture of fire brick and terracotta. This clay is practically exhaustless, though its presence has been known to the geologist ever since the settlement of New Jersey. It is only about 5 years since the first attempt was made to use it in the shape of terracotta. Even now, few of the denizens of our metropolitan centers are aware of what extent this noble American industry has been carried, or what it promises to become. And as this immense clay field, contiguous to the seaboard and situated between New York and Philadelphia, is the most important and characteristic of all that lie within our states, so that the architectural decorations which have been modeled from its plastic substance, as well as the magnificent buildings they adorn, are among the most noteworthy of modern construction. As our traveler proceeds, he finds himself in a curious and interesting spot, within a few miles from either of the busy little towns from which he started, and which owe their prosperity to their manufactories of tiles, firebrick, and terracotta. He overlooks a territory that has been settled for more than 200 years. The land on the south trends toward the Raritan River, distant from half a mile to a mile as the crow flies, hastening to lose itself in the bay of the same name a little farther to the southeast. It broadens there to a great width, and the railway running from New York to Long Branch leaps lightly from pier to pier, over its swift tide, like a bar of music, across which the locomotive hourly chants its refrain of travel and of traffic. The scene here is singularly full of natural charm and historic association. An embroidered mantle in many shades of green, through which show mottled patches of the ground beneath, stretches away to the glistening river, and beyond are the wooded heights of the farther shore. Still more to the left, the eye rests on the beautiful banks of Staten Island, separated from the salt meadows fringing the Jersey shore by the narrower stream of the Kill Von Kull, and that silvery gap between, bounded on 3 sides by Tottenville, and south and Perth Amboy, widens out its 4th side into the lower New York Bay, and that into the ocean itself. The point stretching out at its lower edge rises into the highlands of the Nave's Sink, ending in Sandy Hook, and melting almost imperceptibly into the blue of the sea and sky, through both of which drift back and forth, cloud and sail, like the panorama of dreamland. But it is no dream. Through that brief space the traveler beholds the argosies of the great city of the New World, flitting to and from the ports of every country, interchanging merchandise and bringing back a population fitted to develop the resources of just such a spot as this. And this highway, whence can be seen a picture so full of beauty and suggestiveness, is the same over which large detachments of the Revolutionary Army marched and countermarched, weary and footsore, between Perth Amboy and Trenton or Princeton, in those trying days when history wrote itself in toil and hunger and cold. This soil, precious with the cost of so much effort and courage, has been of little worth to the farmer. Now it has a value as substantial as, if less brilliant than, the mines of California. When tortured, ground, and shaped by a guiding intelligence, it becomes one of the most perfect and enduring of building materials. Fire cannot burn it, nor water destroy. It triumphantly survives frost and mocks at decay. In the ruins of Assyria, Babylon, and Nineveh, debris have been found which bear still, in ineffaceable characters, records of those strange people who are so remote from the present that they seem to have lived on some other planet. Nothing in the British Museum is more choicely guarded than those clay tablets whose inscriptions learned professors have spent years in deciphering, and from which we know what manner of civilization they commemorate. Nay, further still, the antiquarian goes back to ruins which antedate all that is yet known of the history of man, although upon them are clearly traced the records of 4,000 years. The Assyrians, Phoenicians, and Babylonians, as well as the Egyptians, employed terracotta in various ways, for both in and outdoor use, as well as in architecture. Votive offerings, sarcophagi, utensils for the house, and garden ornaments were among them, but to all these offices was added the preservation of records by means of slabs or cylinders of the same material. On these were stamped by the stylus hieroglyphic signs indicating all that remain of the moderns of those personal events, wars, and dynasties which give data for chronology. The most distinguished archaeologists of this age, one of them an American, have been sent by the French government on one of its steamers up the Nile, and at this very hour are doubtless critically superintending groups of swart, half-clad Mussulmans as they upturn the old dust of temples, palaces, and mausoleums to find still further records, laboriously traced in the world's earlier youth, upon a substance which outlasts pillars of iron or of granite. In Chaldea, also, terracotta was employed for interior and exterior work in all kinds of buildings. Colored bricks were arranged in simple but effective patterns, making a pleasing effect. They were easily cleansed, inexpensive, and durable. The Etruscans produced statues in terracotta, very creditable to their knowledge of art. The Greeks must have used terracotta from time immemorial. Homer mentions sun-dried brick, and life-size statues have been found formed from native clay. Figurines, grotesque and beautiful, were frequently deposited in sepulchres, even as late as the 2nd century. As an architectural material, the marble of Pentelicus was so accessible to the Greek that he wanted no other. The Romans, however, freely employed brick and terracotta. The arch of the Cloaca Maxima, the oldest piece of masonry extant in Rome, is made of tile or coarse terracotta, thin, large, and oblong, in a shape peculiar to that date. The walls of temples, palaces, arches, monuments, and mausoleums are of the same substance, and were generally faced with marble. Of this they have long since been despoiled, not only by invading hordes from the north, but by the cupidity of the later rulers of the Eternal City, while the more enduring material yet remains, quaint reminder of a former glory. As an interior decoration, the wall, as well as the vase or the panel, was frequently traced with leaves, vines, and flowers, as the lotus, conventionalized, running about the rim or border. Many of these designs have been changed and adapted to modern ornamentation, according to the current aesthetic fashion, for the principles of art are still more enduring than the materials whereby they are represented. On the body of the vase, or the center of the slab, may he found allegorical pictures, typifying, under the forms of animals or men, the gods of whom they revered, and who were forces or appetites incarnated by an archaic imagination. During a long period afterward, this industry suffered a decline. It was reserved for the fertile plains of Lombardy, which are almost destitute of stone, to carry forward the manufacture of terracotta to its greatest measure of success. During the 4 centuries from the 12th to the 16th, it was then used in construction and decoration in a manner at once so original and exquisite that Madame de Staël's epithet of frozen music justifies itself when applied to the architecture it embellishes. Some of the church fronts, spires and campanies of Pavia, the hospital and Castiglione Palace of Milan, and the beautiful Certosa, so admired by all students and travelers, and even villas and private houses were built during the latter portion of that period, which may be called the Golden Age of terracotta. They are models of elegance and dignity. Some fine reproductions of these may be found in Gruner's Terracotta, Architecture of North Italy. Among them all, that of Certosa stands eminent. This monastic building was the most superb ever erected by any order, and served to shelter only 30 monks. Yet since its foundation, 480 years ago, the rich decorations of its matchless cloisters have served a higher use, that of typifying that poesy may exist in stone and clay. After the 16th century, the ornaments of this material became unsuited to those more elaborate structures which marked the florid style that had then come into vogue. But the father of real artistic work in terracotta was Luca della Robbia, who was born in Florence in 1400, according to Vasari 12 years earlier, and who died in the year 1481. He is not regarded as the equal of contemporaries Ghiberti and Donatello, but his name is even more widely known through his experiments and discoveries in ceramics. To respire that soft Tuscan air was to breathe in a love of art that permeated even the pores of those who lived in an era capable of producing a Michelangelo, a Raphael Sanzio, and a Leonardo da Vinci, an age in which Julius II and Leo X threw the magic of pontifical favor around the painter, the sculptor, and the architect, an age which witnessed the laying the foundations of St. Peter's and many another temple dedicated by the genius of man to the glory of God. While yet a boy, Luca, following the fashion of many art students of the time, became the apprentice of the best goldsmith of his native city. For the boy did not then disdain to climb, by patient, toilsome steps, to a height of his career, through minute details to be acquired by cunning workmanship in gold, silver, or even brass. Here, Luca della Robbia acquired his delicate touch and high finish, and began the compositions for which he was afterwards celebrated. In these, his faces were evidently taken from nature and not too much idealized, since the descendants of their originals can be met upon the streets of his native city by the traveler today. Of the first 25 years of his life, only a few bas-reliefs remain. They are grammar, philosophy, music, astronomy, Plato, and Aristotle, a man playing on the lute, and 2 more that were left unfinished. 20 years later, he began the beautiful series of alto relievos for the balustrade of one of the organs in the Duomo of Florence, which gave him rank as one of the most charming of Italian sculptors. These represent a band of youths dancing, playing upon musical instruments and singing, with the expression in each face so true to the quality of his voice that, to use the expression of an admirer, we can hear the shrill treble, the rich contralto, the clear tenor, and sonorous bass of their quartet. The figures are so skillfully grouped and so graceful in attitude that no impression of monotony is conveyed to the beholder. His first known essays in the so-called Robbia ware were made about the year 1436. After that long study and those repeated experiments, which usher in all inventions of genuine merit, from the nebulous beginning of civilization down to the time of Edison, his purpose was to discover some method of coating clay. with an opaque, hard, steniferous enamel, which could be more easily reproduced than by the slow process of carving marble or casting bronze. In this, he attained results which have not been superseded by later students of the ceramic art. This covering or glaze is made of lead, borax, feldspar, and tin. Sometimes the ingredients are changed according to the kind of product desired. 10 years later, Luca's first painted tiles and the ware which bears his name were made for the tomb of Benozzi Frederigi, Bishop of Fiesole, in the church of San Francesco's Paolo. This tomb was among the finest of the Cinquecento monuments in Tuscany. From that time, his skill gave him a fame which has survived all minute knowledge of his life, save as it is known by his works. By comparing all other pottery of the time with that made by him, the greater degree of opacity and solidity of the works of our inventor are made manifest. Indeed, the secrets of Luca were so well kept that for a quarter of a century, no other artisan in clay manufactured a piece surfaced with staniferous enamel. Those ascribed to the Cafaggiolo pottery date 70 years later than the first recorded articles of Luca della Robbia. The assertion of Vasari, then, seems true, that Luca was the discoverer for Italy of this important improvement of glazing earthenware vessels. What he may have learned of the Moorish potters from Spain, we have no means of knowing. It is a matter of fact that they had attained great skills in the manufacture of what we now call terracotta. During 2 generations, the family of Luca guarded their precious secret. But nature is a telltale to energetic wooers, and gradually a knowledge of the composition became known and adopted in the potteries of Italy and France. Meanwhile, the nephew, Andrea, with his 4 sons, carried the work. The name relative, Luca the Younger, may be really the author of relievos attributed to the elder. They had many distinguishing marks in common. Under the other relatives, however, artwork in terracotta began to decline. It gradually spread into other countries, even in its descendants. One of the Lucas introduced it into France, where the Chateau de Madrid was decorated by him under the patronage of Francis I. Yet its use has never been abandoned. In the south of France, north of Germany, and along the Baltic, it is found in all kinds of buildings, in balustrades, balconies, turrets, spires, and in mural decorations of various kinds. It makes, in its soft shades and diverse forms, a pleasing and varied effect, as different from the gingerbread work of cheap wooden villa decoration, as its substance is more substantial. A few years since, Andrea Boni, of Milan, established a pottery for the making of terracotta in that city, thus renewing the taste for it in Italy. In England, it is barely 200 years since only coarse earthenware was produced. Yet, when Wedgwood concentrated his energies upon refining the quality of terracotta, its improvement was marked and rapid. Within the last few years, Messrs. Dalton have attained a widespread reputation through the production of their potteries at Lambeth. Interesting. So Lambeth, for those that have been following along for these readings, Lambeth is the same district in South London where Mrs. Code set up her manufactory, which lasted for several decades and transferred over to a few folks, which we will touch on in later readings. So again, just another data point and another connection reading through these documents. Very, very interesting. So reading on. Visitors at the Centennial Exhibition at Philadelphia will remember the admiration of the work from a large crowd which always surrounded their exhibit. In the New World, the manufacture of terracotta is newer still. In a succeeding article will be a review of some important buildings in which it is decoratively employed. In the Metropolitan Museum of New York are to be seen a collection of photographs of Italian terracotta, including some of the period of Luca della Robbia. The last chief addition to the museum, by gift of Mr. Marquand, is a composition of the old master himself, a Virgin and Child, with 6 saints. taken from a mortuary chapel. This piece is one of his later and mannered productions. It lacks the easy grace and spontaneity of his earlier creations, though full of happy touches and technical skill. To be continued next week. How exciting. Until the next one.